Let's apply some basic materials to our objects. First, the ball. I'll maximize the perspective view once again. Hover the mouse over perspective and tap the space bar. Select the ball and press the F key on the keyboard, and that'll frame that selected object. Right-click in the viewport and you get the marking menu. And near the bottom, you'll see Assign New Material. Once you do that, you will get the Assign New Material dialog popping up. We want to add a material that has the ability to reflect the environment because we want a shiny plastic ball. For that, Blinn is a good choice. So I'll click on Blinn, and the attribute editor opens up, and it's displaying the Blinn material node. I'm actually going to tear that attribute editor off to a separate window and just give myself a little bit more real estate to work with here. Go back to that Blinn node, and I want to rename it, and I'll call it Ball Blinn. We have the color here, and we also have specular parameters. If we scroll down a little bit, these are the highlights. Eccentricity is the spread. Specular roll-off is the intensity based upon angle, and specular color is the brightness. I'm going to create a pretty intense highlight by reducing the eccentricity down to about 1.5 or so, turning specular roll-off up to 1, and increasing the specular color a little bit as well. And now I've got a nice shiny highlight there. You'll also see reflectivity here. We don't have reflectivity enabled yet because ray tracing is disabled currently in Maya. But later we will come back to this and we will work with mirror reflections. We just have to have an environment in order to reflect anything. Cool. Now, back up to the main color here, also known as the diffuse color. We can drop a map into that to vary the color across the surface. To add a map, click on the Add Render Node button over here. It looks like a little checker. And the Create Render Node window opens up. And we have a lot of options here for textures. You'll see 2D textures. These are organized by category. 3D textures and so on. We go to 2D textures. We just want a simple ramp texture. Click on that. And now a ramp has been applied onto the ball. But we won't see the texture in the viewport unless we enable hardware texturing in the view. Click on the main Maya window and press the 6 key on the keyboard, and that will enable hardware texturing. And if you tumble around in the viewport, you will see that in fact there is a texture applied onto the surface of the ball. Let's adjust the texture here, the ramp. So let's move these little flags around a little bit, and we can create some new ones just by clicking and change their colors. So this first one here, I'll set its color to a blue. And then the next one, I'll make red. Just give it 4 different primary colors here. Make this one green, and then yellow. All right, and if we deselect the ball, we can see that we've got colors on here. I want to have nice, hard, sharp transitions though, so I'll reselect the ball. Go back into that ramp texture. The way to do that is to click on the Create Render Node button here, which has now become a new icon, which means go to the input node, or go to the node that's feeding into the current node. Click on that, and that will take me back to the ramp. We just want to change the positions of these ramps. I'm going to set this one to 0.25. Make this one 0.5. And that one 0.75. And finally, set the interpolation here, which is the blending of colors. I'll set that to none, no interpolation. And now I've got a nice beach ball. Cool, we've got the ramp texture applied. The ramp is an internally generated or procedural map. For the ground plane, I want to apply an actual texture map from a file. So to do that, I need to place the files into my current project before I actually create the material. I'm going to minimize Maya. Here are the textures that come with the tutorial, and we want to put those into the current project's source images folder. Select those and then copy. Go over to Pipeline Maya Project Source Images and paste those in. Okay, now we can go back to Maya and let's select the ground plane. With that ground plane selected, once again, right-click and choose Assign New Material. This time we don't need shiny highlights. I want it to look like a weathered pier. So if we don't need any specular component, we can use a simpler material type, such as Lambert. Click on Lambert. And give it a name. I'll call it Ground Lambert. And remember to press Enter so that that will actually be accepted. Let's put a map into the color slot here once again. But this time we want to choose a file node. Click on File. And now we have the file node visible in the attribute editor. Go down where it says Image Name and Browse. Click on the folder. And that will take you to your current project's source images. And the one we want to choose here is the diffuse color. There are two here. There's a bump map for roughness, and then there's the diffuse map for color. So click on the one that's labeled diffuse and click Open. And now it's applied onto that surface. This is a very simple tutorial. We're not going to worry about the placement of the texture. We're just going to use the default UV mapping or the default coordinates for placement on the surface of the object. Okay, now we also want to add a bump map. We can go back to the Lambert material, reselect the ground plane, and go to the Ground Lambert node, and you'll see bump mapping. That'll give the illusion of roughness. And so that we can see it better, let's turn off the grid. Go up to Display, Grid, and just turn it off and get in a bit closer. So here it is with no bump map applied. Go ahead and click to Create a Render node. And once again, this will be a File node. Click on File. And this time, instead of being taken to the File node attributes, we're taken to the Bump 2D node. And this is an in-between node that assigns a depth to the bump. We'll need to click on the File node here, and then once again, browse for the image. And we'll choose that bump map. And on a bump map, a bright pixel gives the illusion of the surface being pushed out. And a dark pixel gives the illusion of a recessed texture or a depression in the surface. Okay, click Open. We can see we got a very rough surface here now. If you're not seeing the bump map, you might have a different renderer chosen for the viewport. In the viewport panel, you can go up to Render and you have some options here. We want to choose Viewport 2.0. That way we can see the bump map. All right, very good. Now, of course, that's a very intense bump map. We'll want to go back to that Bump 2D node and reduce that bump depth down. Let's give that a value of, let's say, 0.2. And now I've got a little bit more subtle bump effect. All right, cool. So we got some basic materials applied onto our scene. And now it's time to save once again. Go up to the File menu and choose Increment and Save. And because we named our file specifically with a .0001, now the file name has been incremented and we have a new version, ball.0002.ma.